Tao Meeting Archives, November 22nd, 2015. The Greatest Misfortune by Bill Bunting.
Let's begin with the ritual. 起立，面向佛堂，参加圣鞠躬、一鞠躬，再鞠躬，三鞠躬，参加勾点传习鞠躬，开班一鞠躬，请坐下。Please be seated. All right. I'm feeling great today, Bill, for some strange reason, which I won't question. Please feel free to begin whenever you like. I'll go ahead and mute my microphone.
Thanks so much, and welcome everyone to another wonderful iteration of the online Tao study group. It is as I was saying earlier, a balmy 13 degrees in Indianapolis, Indiana right now. We've got a couple of inches of snow on the deck. The rapidity with which that change occurred was remarkable. In the period of about 7 or 8 hours, it went from 50 degrees to 13. And man, I'll tell you, my system was not prepared for that shock this morning. I keep threatening to move somewhere warm. So far, I haven't done it. Today, I want to chat just a little bit about what is actually a part of Chapter 13 of the Tao Te Ching. As soon as I get this out of the way so you can all see, Lao Tzu writes in Chapter 13, in part, what does the greatest misfortune is the self mean? The reason I have great misfortune is that I have the self. If I have no self, what misfortune do I have? We cover this ground in one way or another, actually fairly frequently, by talking about moderating the ego, moderating the self, trying to wisely choose how we handle our desires and attachments and all sorts of things like that. And in Chapter 13, Lao Tzu tells us that the greatest misfortune we can ever have is that self. The self is a cruel and heartless master, and is one that to us, until we learn to recognize it, is virtually invisible. The self exists seeking favor and fearing disgrace. It's tied to its desires and attachments and unable to see beyond the illusions of power and ownership and control. There's always the agenda that's attached to the actions of the ego self, the self-serving motivations, the desires to fulfill our own wishes at the expense of others if necessary, and the motivation of extreme emotional thinking and the absence of calm and tranquil rational thought. That's not to say that having an ego self in and of itself is bad. We all have that component of our personalities, and it is that part of us that's responsible for our survival and for the continued existence of human beings on this planet, largely in part, although it is concurrently the very same component of ourselves that may result in the destruction of mankind through any one of a number of different means. As we look at how we've handled the stewardship of our resources and our planet Earth, it's pretty easy to see the effects of catering to the ego self. And that catering to the ego self extends beyond the individual to businesses, to countries, to the entire globe in one way or another, where the procurement of of wealth and substance and power knows virtually no limits, and the consequences of that striving to acquire wealth and power are written all over the earth. Ultimately, all of our misfortunes can be attributed in one way or another to the ego self, okay? They can be tied directly to the desires and attachments of the ego self. The very activities Lao Tzu speaks of, seeking favor and fearing disgrace, are both deeply held desires by themselves. None of us ever wants to be humiliated and disgraced. That causes some mighty unpleasant emotional responses. It causes a lot of internal grief and turmoil when that happens. And heaven knows we've all made mistakes in our lives, some of which we believe if anybody else knew about them, nobody ever loved us again, that we would become virtually untouchable in human society. Things where we're so mortified by some embarrassingly dumb thing that we did that it's our most fervent hope and prayer that that skeleton never falls out of the closet so that we don't have to endure being mortified again. On the opposite end of that spectrum, everybody wants recognition and praise for what they do well and what they do good. It is a basic, fundamental human desire to feel good about oneself, to feel that our lives are not lived in vain, and that our positive actions and good deed doing, if you will, are recognized by someone and hopefully paraded around for all to see at some point in time. The question isn't whether or not the desire itself is good or evil. The question actually is one of how do we go about achieving those goals of not being humiliated and disgraced, and conversely being recognized for our accomplishments. And this is a tricky question because it's very easy to lose sight of what the real goal is. And the goal is not the adulation of our peers, nor the absence of being humiliated by others. That isn't really at the core of the desires. At the core of the desires is or should be a life well and skillfully lived, and not just the illusion of a life well lived. There is a Tao-centric path that already understands this basic human need and understands how to moderate it so that it doesn't become a problem. Pardon, needed more coffee. And the Tao-centric way of winding up in the position where we don't have to be disgraced, for starters, is to control and moderate the desires and the attachments. I speak very frequently about the illusions of ownership and power and control, and pretty frequently about the fact that all of our desires and attachments one day will bring us suffering. And those two things are pretty much absolute truths. But when we moderate our desires and control our attachments, when we make wise and intelligent choices about which of those things we're going to keep and maintain, then we're not just subject to the whims of our ego selves, chasing down every path looking for an extra dollar or somebody's kind word. The example I use more frequently than any other is that I have a profound attachment to my wife and children, and I have a pretty intense desire that they not go hungry or have to live out in the 13-degree cold this morning, you know, or for anything bad to befall them. I think it's both my responsibility and my most fervent desire to take care of them and make sure that their lives are as fulfilling and as positive and as good as I can possibly make them. That desire and that attachment will one day cause suffering either for me or for them. Most likely, the suffering will be done by them, and that day will come when my body ceases to function. That day is going to be much sooner than later, I certainly hope, than it will be for any of my children or my wife. And so when that day finally comes, they're going to suffer, hopefully for less than half an hour, and then they can go and get on with their lives. But they'll be sad, and they'll miss me, and they'll grieve, and they'll suffer. Does that mean that any of us are willing to give up that particular attachment or that desire to have a wonderful and fulfilling life with them? Absolutely not. What it does mean, at least for me, is that I have chosen to maintain that attachment and that desire, knowing full good and well that one day it's going to cause somebody some suffering. The benefits of that particular attachment and desire for me far outweigh the potential for suffering. Not all desires and attachments come with that same overwhelming positive balance that we'd like to see in the desires and attachments we choose to keep. Most of our desires and attachments are remarkably transient and impermanent in nature, and the vast majority of them do not contribute to a more fulfilled, positive, forward-moving life. But very often, how very often, we don't know the difference between the ones that result in that much more positive outcome and the ones that do not. The Tao-centric way of dealing with that is to make a wise and hopefully mentally healthy choice about that which we will be desirous of and attached to. When it comes to seeking favor, that's something that should never be done overtly. One cannot avoid disgrace nor curry praise by acting to cause those things to happen. That's contrivance and manipulation, and it never ultimately works. Not ever. However, when we demonstrate skill in a particular area of our life, for instance, what we do for a living, or some other aspect of our life where the actions that we are involved in naturally come to the surface in terms of our ability to lead or to demonstrate skill or to render assistance. When there's a natural proficiency combined with appropriate humility, combined with quiet confidence in one's abilities and one's strengths in a particular area, then the adulation and praise isn't conducted in the blowing of trumpets and waving of flags. It is a much more sedate affair where one naturally becomes appreciated for those abilities and much more able to affect positive change and leadership amongst one's peers. We can't ever lose sight of humility and plainness, because even when we become very skillful, if that's accomplished without a degree of humility, then what it looks like is arrogance and hubris. And the fact that it appears that way in some cases is enough to really get some people irritated. And then all of a sudden you find every time you stick your head up for something, there's somebody waiting to shoot it off for you. You can see that behavior going on in business all the time. As people posture and maneuver for position and money and control and the perception of power. The water cooler games that go on continually that feed that process are remarkable to watch. I've had the great good benefit to sit just outside the galley for a while where I work, one of the break areas, and the stuff that one hears around the coffee pot or the microwave or the water cooler is really astounding sometimes. The way that people treat other people to try to get what they want, the manipulations and posturing that occur over things that in 10 or 15 or 20 years will be absolutely inconsequential is remarkable. And yet the perception is that in this moment, acquiring that praise, getting that position, having that perceived power is the most important thing in the world. Nobody recognizes that those things are all made out of paper. They're going to crumble eventually, and none of them are worth a thing. This is what Lao Tzu truly means when he says that the greatest misfortune is the self. The self constructs this paper reality and then sells to us the concept that it's real, and it isn't. And it never will be. And so it's incumbent upon us, once we understand that, to maintain that humility and that balance. Additionally, we've got to mitigate the strong emotions that we feel sometimes and avoid the extreme reactions. Whether it's passive-aggressive or overt or just a matter of stewing in our own natural juices, extremes of emotion and action are destructive, first of all to us, and second of all to those around us. It's a hallmark of skillful living not to allow one's emotions to run away with one's mind. And it's a trait of one who's cultivating the teachings that we know better than to allow that to occur. The surest way to walk faith first into disgrace is to allow our strong emotions to cause us to do something really dumb. And heaven knows, I've been there. I didn't always cultivate the Tao teachings, and I've said before, my primary method of dealing with interpersonal conflict and issues was to kick the door in and come in with both guns blazing. It took me several years to learn that particular method of dealing with other people was perhaps not as effective as I would have liked. Now I deal with things differently, and it's much better. We have to keep in mind that our real job here in this existence is to cultivate the true self. If we have the karmic affinity for the Tao teachings, if we are where we are supposed to be and doing what we're supposed to be doing, then we should be learning every day at least a bit to cultivate the Buddha nature, the true self, to practice the teachings of the Tao to the best of our abilities, and not from the church of what's happening now, but from an authentic tradition such as this, where the real meaning and real benefits of the teachings can be ascertained. There's a tremendous amount of disinformation available on the internet, and from a variety of sources, most well-meaning, some not. But understanding what is and is not authentic is important. We have to be able to recognize our own flaws as flaws and our own shortcomings as faults and correct and refine them. That's the process of introspection that we speak about so much. It requires a level of absolutely brutal self-honesty and also the ability to be gentle with other people, to recognize that they are only other souls on the path trying to find their way home. But we can't refine another person. We can't help another person to dig down to their true self. All we can do is show them, hopefully, a lifestyle that's worthy of emulating and perhaps shine a light on their path. And then maybe for a while, our two paths go the same way together. We have to learn to act without attachment, the true meaning of Wei Wu Wei. Ensconced in humility and acting without agenda, those things are the stepping stones to genuine success and to real leadership. But they occur without the fanfare that perhaps some folks would want, sometimes just for doing what it is the job requires. And in the job of life, there's nobody standing there waiting to wave a flag for us. There's nobody there waiting to toot the horn for us. There simply is the day-to-day journey from here to there, and the hope that perhaps one of these times we'll get it right so that we can break the cycle of samsara. We have to utilize honesty and integrity to the best of our ability, because it is through those two things that our actions have meanings and we avoid being disgraced. Not all of those things are easy to do. And in fact, this is perhaps among the most difficult of the teachings to apply, because the ego self is such an integral part of who and what we are. You know, from birth, that ego self looks after us and helps us to survive and helps us to find a place somewhere in the world. And until we know that there is a different, perhaps better set of answers out there somewhere, it is that ego self that we are most closely bound to. It's the personality that we see when we look in the mirror every morning when we get up. It's only through the discovery of the true self that we can even begin to think about the presence of maybe a better set or a different set of answers. And so, for very many people, there's no distinguishment between the ego self and the true self because the awareness isn't there. Perhaps in this lifetime, some of those folks lack the affinity. They're not quite ready for that truth to confront them. Who knows? It's not my question to answer, certainly. Perhaps some of them are ready and just haven't seen or heard it yet. Perhaps someone will see what we do and how we do it, and seeing that will plant a seed that will allow them one day to also discover that truth. However it happens, until we discover the truth, we can't begin to cultivate the true self because we don't know it's there. And ultimately, there's no elimination of the ego self. We can't get rid of it. We can't be rid of all of our desires and attachments. I don't believe that's possible. But I think the more that we're able to reduce the influence of the ego self and moderate the desires and attachments, the happier ultimately we will find that we are. Thank you all awfully much for letting me chat with you this morning. I hope wherever you are, it's way warmer than 13 degrees, and I'm awful happy I'm not outside this morning. Thank you all very much.
Bill, thank you so much. Bill, one thing that you said caught my attention, and that is about the attachments that you choose. So from my observation of you, I can see that you have chosen your family and the Tao as your attachments. Would you say that's true?
Absolutely.
Any other ones that you have chosen that perhaps I haven't named?
My Tai Chi students, the Tai Chi school, health, stuff like that.
All the things that add meaning to your life. I think it's safe to kind of summarize it like that.
Yes, I really am not attached to stuff. I can walk away from everything that I own right now without so much as a twinge. But the people that are in my life and the things that have helped me make my life what it is today, those things are important to me, and yeah, I'm attached to them.
So from Michael, Michael says, thank you, Bill. It was an excellent presentation. From Julie, great talk. Very good reminders to keep throughout our days. Thank you, Bill. I also want to touch on when you brought up, knowing what your faults are and then correcting them. So that's very true to the Tao tradition, to be reflective, to contemplate, to think about the effect of our actions and words on other people, and consider that perhaps there is a way that I can do things better. That's core. That's very important part of Tao cultivation. Now, when I surf on the internet and visit different websites, I see distinctively different attitudes about that, about faults. And so, as an example, see if you recognize this, Bill. I'll hear one particular gentleman saying something like, "You see, the concept of faults is just another one of the judgmental illusions with which humanity has been burdened. It's time we let it go."
Yeah.
Of course, the same person turns around and engages in a heated debate with someone else, an argument, and through that exchange, you see all kinds of ugly things come out of this person, indicating that this is this person who wants to let go of the concept of faults has good reasons to do so because he has plenty of faults.
Yeah, well, you and I both know, without naming names, there are a few places out there that take a certain amount of pleasure in flaming you and I both, and going around the teachings. But everybody has faults and shortcomings. We all have them.
I think the difference is that there are people who appreciate knowing that they have stuff to work on, and then there are also people, I guess my critics and your critics, that don't appreciate knowing that they have anything that they need to work on.
Even if no one points it out, they know in their own hearts.
That's just it. I used to think that it would be obvious to everyone. For instance, I used to think that these people, if after a few years they still see no change, no significant change in their lives for the better, that they ought to know at that point that they're often on the wrong track, a track that produces no results. However, I am wrong. They continue to say the exact same thing year after year.
Yeah, it's amazing, but it's the truth.
I'm resigned to the fact that there's really not a whole lot we can do about that. We just have to let them be them and, focus on just our own cultivation.
Yeah, it's the only thing we can do, and that's not just you and I, that's all of us. All we can do is put a worthwhile example out there and hope that somebody with the affinity can eventually work their way around, maybe to finding the temple or finding something else. I've got a couple of folks that emailed me last week, and I'm still working on how to reply to them, because one of the questions is where do I go to do this more formally, and I'm not sure exactly where that is yet.
Let's go ahead and do the meeting ending ritual. Please follow me. 起立，面向佛堂，持架三鞠躬，一鞠躬，再鞠躬，三鞠躬，持架各位点传是一鞠躬，结班一鞠躬。Thanks everybody. We're done for now.
Join the Tao meeting live to participate in the questions and commentary. For more information, go to http://taoism.net/tao/connect-online.